remember watching one of those Zorro cartoons when I was very young, but for some reason never finished it nor followed up with anything from the franchise throughout my life. So I hadn't retained any real knowledge of the masked fox, other than him being a moonlight swashbuckler with Spanish roots. That is, until I finally decided several nights ago to watch 1998's critically acclaimed summer blockbuster, The Mask of Zorro. In this rendition, there are actually two Zorros, the original Diego de la Vega and his protege, Alejandro Murrieta. De la Vega was imprisoned by his longtime political enemy, Rafael Montero, who was a corrupt governor of the Californias during the Spanish colonial period, but not before having his wife Esperanza accidentally killed in the process and taking his infant daughter Elena as his own to Spain for 20 years. Upon escaping and resurfacing, De la Vega recruits the help of Murrieta, who had saved his life as a boy, to figure out Montero's true motives for returning to the Californias, take revenge on Montero's Captain Harrison Love for murdering Murrieta's brother, and reclaim Elena as his rightful daughter. Amazing stunts, a fiery romance, and unforgettable movie moments ensue. But here, I want to focus solely on Elena, because for someone with such a major influence on the plot, we don't really get to see a whole lot of her partaking in the drama. Now, this isn't to say that what we do see of her doesn't exemplify compelling characterization. For starters, she actually subverts the damsel in distress trope in that her life is never truly threatened, and she always acts on her own accord. Dare I argue that, in a way, she has a lot to gain from being Montero's adopted daughter because her protection is virtually guaranteed, and she has been granted full access to quality education in the art of fencing and politics since childhood. Talk about using what you have to your advantage. Beyond that, the audience is able to discern a great deal of her character's nuances through her minimal yet impactful dialogue and actress CatherineZetaJones' expressive visual grammar. We know that Elena takes after her biological parents. She is hungry for adventure and refuses to stay quiet about her beliefs, much to Montero's dismay. Though as authoritative as he appears, Elena doesn't ever face any consequences for her actions, which speaks to how influential she is, or can be, for someone else's humanity. On the topic of Montero, we can see she isn't entirely on board with his ideals, and wants to better understand the mysterious Zorro's position regarding how a state should be run, seeing as he is, ironically, right in front of her in this case, and she's perceptive enough to know something was off by the way Murrieta is supposedly agreeing with Montero's viewpoint. I like how the antagonist's daughter is actually a good person and isn't afraid to think for herself, though Montero isn't always the brightest thinker when it comes to her. Budding intelligence aside, she also has a tender heart, and the natural bond she shares with De la Vega before even discovering what his real relationship is to her is the epitome of this. Considering who she's been living with all these years, we would never expect her to be as down-to-earth and eager to learn more as she is. And the most interesting part of it all is that, despite everything, she still loves and believes in Montero. Which is why I feel that far more screen time should have been allocated to developing Elena's deep, believable inner conflict between wanting to help De la Vega and her eventual husband Murrieta, and her practically undying devotion to Montero. The third act should have had her swept up in an emotional whirlwind. Picture this: Montero confesses to her abduction. She realizes that her adopted father is trying to sell off the Californias to Santa Ana with gold mines through slave labor. She sees firsthand the condition these lower-class citizens are in, and Montero pretends to put her life in danger so that De la Vega wouldn't attack him, and in all fairness, how is she supposed to know? This should all have an effect on Elena, but it doesn't. Years of lies, planned treason, exploitation, and perceived betrayal would nigh certainly trigger strong reactions from anyone. While Murrieta and Captain Love were duking it out, Elena should have been the one to take over the final showdown with Montero when De la Vega was gravely injured, pleading with the one she once called father in rage and confusion. That could have been a monumental cinematic moment. Had it stopped at fencing, she clearly would have succeeded against Murrieta in the stable, and I think this duel should have happened earlier in the film, but I digress. She's also a great shot with a gun, and is capable of rescuing people in captivity. Hence why it doesn't make sense that her abilities and drive come to a halt just because it's the Zorro's time to be dashing and daring for the umpteenth time. Elena deserved to have a fully realized arc that made her role in the entire cast's stories that much more believable and impactful beyond just the love interest. I know there is a sequel to this film, 2005's The Legend of Zorro, and Elena evidently has more to do in that one. But I am a firm believer of always giving characters the development they deserve under the assumption that stories are self-contained. Otherwise, it just looks lazy at best and inconsiderate at worst, especially in light of prevailing mainstream media portrayals of women. I love Elena. I love CatherineZetaJones. But I also would have very much loved to see a complete dynamic between this unfortunately wasted potential and the men in her life.